The Cretaceous wasn't a world, it was a slaughterhouse with weather. For 79 million years, Earth ran an experiment in how much killing one planet could sustain. The result was a period so hostile, so densely packed with apex predators, so saturated with things that wanted to eat everything else, that a modern human dropped into the middle of it would have a life expectancy measured in minutes, not days. Most people picture the Cretaceous as the dinosaur world. The dinosaurs were the easy part. So the question isn't whether you'd survive the Cretaceous. You wouldn't. The real question is whether you'd survive long enough to understand what was killing you. And before we're done, we'll get to the one thing that finally killed this world, the single event that gave your ancestors the breathing room they needed to eventually produce you. Start with the climate. The Cretaceous was hot, the kind of hot that turns Antarctica into a tropical rainforest. Global temperatures ran about 18 degrees Fahrenheit higher than today, which doesn't sound catastrophic until you realize what that does to a planet. The poles had no ice. None. The Arctic was a temperate forest with crocodile relatives sunning themselves on the riverbanks. The equator was a sauna so oppressive that even the cold-blooded reptiles probably struggled to cool down. Sea levels were so high that the entire central United States, from the Gulf of Mexico up through Texas, Kansas, the Dakotas, all the way into Canada, was underwater. There was a sea running through the middle of America called the Western Interior Seaway. It was full of teeth. If you were standing on what is now Topeka, Kansas, you wouldn't be standing. You'd be 600 feet underwater, and something with a mouth wider than your kitchen would be circling. The air was different too. Carbon dioxide was about 4 times what it is now. Oxygen levels ran higher than they do today, around 25% compared to our modern 21, which meant every lightning strike could touch off a wildfire the higher CO2 would happily feed. The climate engine ran in extremes. Hurricanes during the Cretaceous were almost certainly more violent than anything we measure today. Imagine a Category 5 making landfall every season in every coastal region, with no satellites to warn you, no buildings to hide in, and no way to outrun something traveling at over 150 miles per hour. The weather alone was an apex predator. That was just the weather. Now look at what walked through it. Tyrannosaurus rex was 40 feet long, weighed about 9 tons, and bit down with around 12,800 pounds of force. A modern saltwater crocodile, the strongest biter alive today, manages about 3,700 pounds. T-Rex tripled it. The bite could crush bone like a sledgehammer hitting a walnut, then pull, then crush again. Paleontologists have found T-Rex coprolites, which is the scientific word for fossilized droppings, packed with pulverized bone from animals it had eaten whole, not chewed. Demolished. T-Rex didn't hunt. It executed. T-Rex ruled only North America. Other continents had their own apex predators, and some of them were bigger. That title goes to a dinosaur from what is now Argentina called Giganotosaurus, which stretched to about 42 feet long and may have hunted in groups. There was also Giganotosaurus, the shark-toothed lizard of North Africa, which had serrated teeth the size of bananas and a head longer than a refrigerator. And in the rivers, Spinosaurus prowled with a body built like a 50-foot crocodile and a sail on its back, tall enough to make it visible from a mile away. 4 different apex predators, on 4 different land masses, each one capable of killing anything else in its ecosystem. There was no continent in the Cretaceous where you could go to escape the big things. They were everywhere. And the herbivores weren't safe to be around either. Triceratops weighed about 12 tons and carried 3 horns up to 4 feet long. It used those horns to fight off T-Rex, which means it could absolutely use them on you. A startled Triceratops at full charge would hit you with the force of a Ford F-250 traveling at 25 miles per hour, and the horns wouldn't just hit, they'd skewer. Ankylosaurus, the armored tank, swung a tail club at the end of a body that weighed nearly 9 tons. Paleontologists studying Ankylosaurus tail club biomechanics have calculated that a full swing could break the leg bones of an attacking T-Rex. These animals were vegetarians. They were also walking arsenals. There was nothing in the Cretaceous that didn't have a weapon. Pull back from the ground. Look up. In the skies of the late Cretaceous, an animal called Quetzalcoatlus was flying around with a wingspan of about 36 to 39 feet. To put that in your driveway, that's wider than 2 Ford F-150 pickup trucks parked nose to nose. When it was standing on the ground, Quetzalcoatlus was about 16 to 18 feet tall, roughly the size of a giraffe, with a beak long enough to swallow a coyote whole. And yes, it could fly across continents for hours at a time. Recent biomechanical studies suggest it could cover thousands of miles without landing, riding thermals and updrafts the way a glider rides wind. If you were standing in a Cretaceous floodplain and the shadow of one passed over you, it would be the size of a small airplane. Quetzalcoatlus, by the way, was a pterosaur, not a dinosaur. Pterosaurs were flying reptiles that evolved from a completely separate branch of the family tree. The Cretaceous skies were not full of dinosaurs. They were full of pterosaurs, hundreds of species of them ranging from sparrow size to bigger than a Cessna. While most of them probably ate fish, the big ones almost certainly ate smaller dinosaurs, possibly including young T-Rex. The Cretaceous food chain ran sideways. It looped. Predators ate other predators and got eaten in return in chains that crossed land, air, and water. Now, go down. Go into the water. The Cretaceous ocean was the closest thing this planet has ever produced to a horror film. Mosasaurs, which were essentially giant marine lizards, reached lengths of 50 feet and weighed up to 14 tons. They had 2 sets of teeth, one set in the upper jaw and a second set in the roof of the mouth, designed to prevent prey from sliding back out. Once a mosasaur had you, you weren't getting away. They were warm-blooded, and they could give birth in the water. There were also plesiosaurs, the long-necked marine reptiles, with necks up to 23 feet long, ending in mouths full of needle-like teeth. Imagine swimming in a warm, tropical sea, looking down and seeing a head the size of a horse coming up at you from below, with about 15 feet of neck behind it. That happened in this ocean, constantly. And then there were the sharks. Cretaceous and Squalicorax patrolled the same waters, scavenging mosasaur kills and occasionally taking down mosasaurs themselves. Above them, just under the surface, swam Xiphactinus, a 17-foot bony fish with a mouth full of inch-long teeth that hunted by ramming and swallowing other fish whole. Paleontologists have pulled Xiphactinus fossils from the rocks of Kansas, with entire other fish still sitting inside their rib cages, completely intact, the predator having died with its last meal undigested. Even the birds were a problem. Hesperornis was a 6-foot-long, flightless diving bird with teeth in its beak that descended into the water column to hunt fish at depth. The Cretaceous ocean ran a system where the apex predators ate the apex predators. There was no safe depth, no safe time of day, and no safe distance from shore. Back to land. We've covered the giants. Now let's cover the things that would actually catch you. The smaller predators of the Cretaceous are the ones that would have written your obituary. Dromaeosaurids, the family that includes Velociraptor and Deinonychus, were the velociraptors of the popular imagination, but the real ones are arguably worse. Deinonychus was about 11 feet long, weighed around 175 pounds, and had a switchblade claw on the second toe of each foot that could open like a folding knife. It hunted in coordinated groups. It had feathers. It was fast, smart, and built for the kind of takedown where one of them gets your attention while 2 others come from the sides. A modern human in a Deinonychus pack's hunting range would last, optimistically, about 3 minutes. The bigger cousin, Utahraptor, was 23 feet long and weighed about 1,500 pounds. That's roughly the size of a grizzly bear with feathers and a sword on each foot. These animals were not stupid. The brain-to-body ratios in the dromaeosaur family put them among the most intelligent dinosaurs that ever lived, comparable to modern flightless birds. They could problem solve, they could ambush, and they were everywhere in the Cretaceous, in every ecosystem, on nearly every landmass. Add Troodon to the list, an 8-foot-long predator with the largest brain-to-body ratio of any dinosaur ever discovered. Some paleontologists have argued Troodon's intelligence was approaching that of a modern crow, which doesn't sound impressive until you remember what crows actually do. They use tools, they recognize individual human faces, they plan ahead. Troodon hunted in groups, in twilight, in environments where its enormous eyes gave it an advantage over almost everything else moving. Sleeping outside in a Cretaceous forest meant being watched. The big predators were the threat in daylight. Troodon was the threat after dark. Stay with me, because the next 30 seconds are the part that gets me. Imagine you survive an encounter with everything we've covered so far. You've dodged a T-Rex, outlasted a raptor pack, watched a Quetzalcoatlus glide past at sunset. You go to drink from a river. The water in that river is full of Sarcosuchus, a crocodilian relative that reached 40 feet long and weighed about 8 tons. That's the size of a small school bus in a river watching the bank. The Cretaceous produced super-crocodiles on multiple continents. Different species, same blueprint, all built for ambushing animals coming to the water's edge. In their rivers, they were the apex, bigger than anything else swimming, bigger than most things walking. Even smaller waters weren't safe. Champsosaurs, which looked like long-snouted crocodiles, infested every swamp. The swamps were full of leeches the size of your thumb, mosquitoes carrying blood-borne parasites that had been evolving for tens of millions of years to drain blood from massive prey, and ticks the size of grapes when they were engorged. Where the Cretaceous had giants, it had giant parasites to feed on them. You wouldn't get sick from the Cretaceous. You'd be eaten alive by it, one bite at a time, from things small enough to ignore. We need to talk about the plants. The Cretaceous is when flowering plants exploded across the earth. Before this period, the world was a sea of green ferns and conifers. By the late Cretaceous, the first flowering trees, the first grasses, still rare but emerging, and the first plants with chemical defenses had spread to every continent. Many of these plants were brutally toxic. They had to be because the herbivores eating them were the size of houses. A modern human with no immunity to Cretaceous plant chemistry would be poisoned by half of what they touched. The fruits of the early angiosperms, pronounced angiosperms, the flowering plants were often loaded with alkaloids that modern animals have spent 70 million years learning to tolerate. You haven't. Your liver would not cope, and the air, again, was thick with spores, mold, fungi, plant pathogens. Any cut, any scrape, any wound would become a vector for a fungal infection your immune system had never encountered. The Cretaceous would kill you slowly, even if nothing chased you. But everything would chase you, that's the thing. Every part of this world wanted you dead, from the apex predators down to the soil microbes. There was no safe meal, no safe drink, no safe place to sleep. The species that lived through the Cretaceous earned their survival. They had thick hides, fast metabolisms, sharp senses, or the speed to outrun anything that wasn't already faster than them. You have none of those things. Modern humans evolved for a world that has been comparatively gentle for 66 million years. So how did this nightmare end? The answer is a 9-mile-wide rock from space, traveling at about 45,000 miles per hour, that hit the planet near what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. The impact released energy equivalent to about 100 trillion tons of TNT, which is more than every nuclear weapon ever built, detonated at once, multiplied by 10,000. The crater it punched into the Earth is about 110 to 120 miles wide. That's wider than the state of Connecticut. The shockwave traveled outward at thousands of miles per hour. The atmosphere above the impact site reached temperatures hotter than the surface of the sun. Within hours, debris falling back through the atmosphere set forests on every continent on fire. Within weeks, the sky was black with soot and the planet was plunged into a winter that lasted years. If you were standing on the beach in what is now Mexico the morning of the impact, you'd see the flash before you felt anything. A second sun, brighter than the real one, on the southern horizon. Then the air would change. The shock wave would arrive seconds later, traveling faster than sound. You wouldn't hear it coming. The wind that followed would peel the bark off trees and scour the soil down to bedrock for hundreds of miles. The animals that didn't die in the first minute died in the first day. The animals that survived the first day died in the first month as the sky darkened and the plants started failing. By year 3, anything larger than a beagle had starved. The dinosaurs, which had ruled this planet for 165 million years, were gone in geological terms within about 100,000 years. The mosasaurs followed, the pterosaurs followed, 3/4 of every species on Earth followed, and down in the burrows, your ancestors waited. The mammals that lived through the Cretaceous were small. Most of them weighed less than a pound. They were nocturnal, because anything daytime-sized was food for something with teeth. They hid in trees, under logs, in tunnels in the dirt. For 165 million years, they had been the rats of their world, scuttling between the legs of giants, eating insects and eggs and whatever they could grab when nothing was looking. The asteroid changed all of that in a single afternoon. The giants died. The hiders inherited the world. Every mammal alive today, including every person watching this video, is descended from those Cretaceous survivors. Your ancestor on that day was a small, warm-blooded, mostly nocturnal creature with a heartbeat full of fear and a body small enough to survive on almost nothing. It outlasted T-Rex, it outlasted Quetzalcoatlus, it outlasted the mosasaurs, and it did it by being unimpressive enough that the apocalypse didn't notice it. The Cretaceous ended in a single, catastrophic, world-ending impact that turned the planet into a graveyard for the largest animals that had ever existed. Somehow, against odds that should have been impossible, that ending was the best thing that ever happened to your evolutionary line. If the asteroid had missed, the dinosaurs would still be here. The mammals would still be the size of squirrels, hiding from things with teeth. There would be no humans, no cities, no language, no music, no science. The slaughterhouse with weather would have continued for another 66 million years with no signs of stopping. The only reason you exist, the only reason anything with a brain like yours exists, is because a rock fell out of the sky at exactly the right angle, at exactly the right speed, at exactly the right moment in geological history. Mark this down. The Cretaceous ruled this planet for 79 million years. Humans, in our current form, have ruled it for about 300,000. Take that ratio. The Cretaceous lasted more than 260 times longer than we have. It was the dominant chapter of life on this planet for longer than the entire history of the mammalian dynasty that came after it. We've ruled this world for an eye blink. The Cretaceous ruled it for an era, and the era's record still stands. The things that made the Cretaceous a slaughterhouse haven't gone anywhere. The climate engine that ran those hurricanes is still here. The asteroid belt that produced the impactor is still up there, slowly grinding out new rocks. The volcanism that helped finish off the dinosaurs is still bubbling underneath places like Yellowstone. The Cretaceous ended because one of those conditions finally came down at the wrong angle. We should be glad it ended. We should also be glad we live in the gentle pause that came after, because the planet that produced T-Rex is the same planet you're standing on, and it has not changed its mind about being patient. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.